Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a moment. While you're settling in, tell us in chat where you're joining from. And, we always have a fun question. So share something that you've been learning about lately and in what modality. Stephanie, anything fun that you've been learning lately?
Yeah, I like this question because I feel like it reminds us that we're all still learning. I, for years at this point now, have been learning about renovating or restoring my old house. Um, and the interesting thing is like the various modalities that I've used to learn any random thing, like how to re-rope double hung windows or whatever. I've relied on Instagram for those short overviews, YouTube for these more in-depth, like detailed looks at things. I've read blogs, and that's been super helpful to get like information or links to tools. And I've also really benefited. We have a local architectural salvage shop, and the people who are volunteering there are just a wealth of information. So it's been fun to like learn about these projects in all of these various modalities.
I had a meeting with one of our customers yesterday where I learned something very cool, and that is that she is an instructional designer and she's studying for this professional certification that she'll take over the summer. And she's actually using Design Plus to create some interactive exercises for herself to use as a study guide. And I thought, I am going to share that in our webinar today.
Love it. That's totally like creating your own flashcards, for your high school English vocabulary test or something, but it's Design Plus, and that's so great. We're getting some really good uh, sharing in the chat, things that you're all learning about and what modalities, and definitely seeing a lot of like Instagram and YouTube, and um, there's certainly a benefit to all of that. Love it.
I'm really excited to see so far not one but two people learning garment sewing because that's pretty niche, but that's a thing that I'm very into, and I would definitely agree YouTube has been a huge help.
Oh.
We're at the top of the hour. So let's get started. But before we officially kick off, let's cover some logistics. We are recording this webinar and we'll share it with you all, along with links to all of the useful resources that we shared today as an email, and we'll send that within the next 2 days. You're welcome to use chat throughout the webinar. We love a lively chat. However, if you have specific questions, please submit those in the Q&A feature in Zoom because we don't want those questions getting lost in our chat. Claire will be monitoring the Q&A area and she'll answer as many questions during the webinar as possible. We always hope to have a few minutes at the end to get to answer some of those questions live. If this is your first time joining our fun, let me tell you a little bit about Cidi Labs. Cidi Labs was founded out of a partnership with Utah State University, where Kenneth Larson, our co-founder, was working as an instructional designer. He was given permission to hack Canvas, and he started making the first iteration of what would later become DesignPLUS. Over the years, our team has grown with educators and instructional designers, as well as former customers, including yours truly, who are drawn to improving the learning experience for everyone. We have 6 products for Canvas, from accessibility to course lifecycle management. All these tools have been developed in close partnership with universities and with our customers. Today, we'll be showing off UDoIt, our Canvas course accessibility assistant, and DesignPLUS, our must-have design suite of 3 tools that make creating engaging content for Canvas accessible, affordable, and fun. That's always the most important part. We want to have fun. Let me introduce our presenters today. Stephanie is our product marketing manager and the primary researcher behind our Design Matters and Accessibility Matters blogs and webinars. Melissa is one of our amazing training and documentation specialists. And I'm Amanda, one of the customer success managers here at Cidi Labs. We have other Cidi Labs team members also on our call today, and if they haven't already, they'll say hi to you all in the chat. Our webinar today is part 2 of a 3-part series on building universal design in Canvas. If you missed part one, no worries. You can catch the recording in our webinars page. Today, we're focused specifically on building supportive representation opportunities. Before we dive in, let us do a little exercise. We shared a lot of important information about engagement in our last webinar, and I'm curious to know whether Stephanie and Melissa were actually paying attention. And so, in
Pop
true
quiz.
universal design for learning fashion, I don't want to assume that they or any of you joining us today are all starting from the same place. So instead, I'd like to give everyone a chance to reflect on what you already know and what you're hoping to learn today. So we're going to begin with a quick KWL exercise. And for everyone who may be new to KWL, it's a simple reflection tool where you jot down what you know, what you want to know, and later what you've learned. So let's start with the first column, what you know. Stephanie, Melissa, everyone here with us, please use chat to let us know, what do you already know about UDL?
Such a good question. Yeah, do join us in chat. I was one of the co-presenters, so maybe we'll start with Melissa. What do you know about UDL?
So when I think of UDL, I think of it as a proactive rather than a reactive approach to meeting different learners' needs. Like not waiting until people are struggling, but setting things up for them in advance.
Love that. Love that. Absolutely. And for those who are out there, like, what is UDL, right? UDL is Universal Design for Learning. We love an acronym in education. And this was developed by CAST, which is an organization behind their framework. I also think about learner variability.
Yeah.
And that gets at your point, Melissa, about this proactive approach, because it's just acknowledging that there's quite a bit of variability, whether that be related to like an accessibility consideration or just different ways that we approach learning. And so, yeah, I do think that that acknowledges that proactive approach.
And then I think another point that I'm also seeing a lot in the chat is multiple options or multiple means of engagement, representation, et cetera.
Yeah, and that goes hand in hand with that learner variability. It's like if we acknowledge there's variability in the learners, then we're also going to need multiple ways to do things, to approach learning. Absolutely. Love it.
Somebody just said UDL, the Swiss Army knife of learning design.
Oh,
I
I
love
love that.
that. That KWL was super fun. We learned a lot, or we remembered a lot, and that KWL is part of our Design Plus library, so you can go find that cool design and use it for your own courses. Let's do just a very quick rundown of universal design for those who didn't make it to our first webinar. In a nutshell, UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is an educational framework designed to make learning accessible and effective for all students. The idea of universal design actually started in architecture, and one of the clearest real-world examples is the curb cut. Curb cuts are essential for people with certain disabilities, and they also benefit many other people who don't strictly need them, including parents pushing strollers, people riding bikes, and travelers with rolling luggage. When we design with access in mind from the beginning, we create environments and experiences that are smoother, simpler, and more usable for everyone. Universal Design for Learning applies the same philosophy to education, so that instead of retrofitting accommodations after students struggle, we design courses that are flexible from the very beginning. And there are three core principles in UDL. Multiple means of engagement, that was the topic of our last webinar, focuses on different ways to motivate and involve our learners. Multiple means of representation, which is today's topic, is all about different ways to present information. And multiple means of action and expression, coming next month, be sure to register for that, focuses on different ways for students to show what they know. So now that we're all cut up, Stephanie, lead the way forward.
Absolutely. Thanks, Amanda. Now, we are going to be thinking specifically about how to incorporate universal design principles in Canvas. And when that's the goal, there really are two separate but related components. There's the ideas side, like creating or adjusting your curriculum, lessons, and assessments to incorporate universal design principles. And then there's that building side, like actually building those ideas and experiences into Canvas and trying to do so without being some kind of coding wizard, right? And so in this three-part series on building universal design in Canvas, Cidi Labs, our focus will be on building those elements into Canvas. But I want to say, we don't want to leave anyone hanging on the ideas side ever. I can tell you that there is no shortage of resources for learning more about universal design and finding really incredible lesson and assessment ideas online. And in fact, we had a special guest join us in that first webinar we've mentioned to be a touch point specifically on the ideas side. So you can certainly review that webinar if you missed it. We'll also be showcasing ideas such as utilizing that KWL chart to help learners make their thinking process more explicit while we're demonstrating the how you build those experiences into Canvas. Today, our webinar is focused on the second core principle in Universal Design for Learning, which is designing multiple means of representation. Representation really is about how students access and make sense of information in their learning. In any course, students bring different prior knowledge. So I saw a few of you in the chat like, I don't know much about UDL, right? Different language backgrounds, sensory preferences, and ways of processing information. And from a UDL perspective, representation means offering multiple ways for students to perceive and understand the material. So barriers are reduced before they become obstacles. It's that proactive element that Melissa brought up earlier. So this can include providing content in different formats, think text, audio, visuals, video. That could be clarifying key vocabulary and concepts. That could be organizing information really clearly and in a structured method, and highlighting patterns or connections to support learner comprehension. So before we jump right into today's agenda and all the thinking about representation, let's take a second to think about the W in our KWL chart. What do we want to know more about or hope to learn today? So again, share some of your thoughts in the chat because we can kind of reference those as we go throughout the webinar today. And then we'll pop over to our KWL that's built in Canvas using DesignPLUS one more time. So what do we want to know about this topic today?
Stephanie, I want to echo something that was asked in Q&A, which is how do you provide multiple ways for students to receive content without being redundant or overwhelming?
Yeah.
It's a fantastic question.
Oh, I love having to spell
That's
on
a
a
tough one.
live webinar. Okay.
Don't worry, no one's watching. This is a safe space.
There's no one here. Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. And I'm such a brain science nerd. I'm like already being like, well, that's one of Mayer's multimedia principles, is the redundancy effect. OMG. Okay. What else might we want to know today?
I was thinking something kind of similar, like when Amanda used the word overwhelming. I remember when I was teaching at a UDL focused school, we got really excited about offering all the choices and it was just too many. So how do you figure out what's the sweet spot in terms of providing options?
Yes. Oh my gosh, here we go. It's a sweet spot. Okay. Yeah, and I'm seeing some of that. I'm also seeing comments about symbols. I'm seeing questions about what, of course, we're going to cover today is talking about with DesignPLUS. So great. Keep that in the back of your mind. That W is what it does, brain science wise, is priming your mind to be aware and pay attention to things. And so it's bringing questions to the forefront so that when that answer comes to you, you're more primed to hear it. We love that. And while I'm excited to help with some of those W's we saw in the chat, our webinar today will focus on research and actionable strategies to design for the following in Canvas. We'll talk about designing for flexible multimodal content. We'll talk about designing for layered meaning and designing for knowledge building. And with those research-backed practical strategies, we'll also showcase how Cidi Labs tools make designing for these goals easy and fun. Now, to be clear, I want to say this up front. This is not a training session, so we'll be showing a lot of what's possible. I want to say that when you license our tools, you have access to amazing training resources. Shout out to Melissa. And amazing customer success managers. Shout out to Amanda, who will help you turn the ideas into reality in your courses or at your institution. So hopefully the showcase today proves inspiring. So Melissa, without further ado, can you get us started with the first topic today?
Yes, I sure can. So, we're going to start today by focusing on providing flexible multimodal content. So, not everyone learns the same way. We talked about this idea of variability in learners. And so that means that any one mode of presenting information is going to work well for some people and not so well for others. For example, I love playing tabletop games with friends, but I'm one of those people where if someone tries to explain a game out loud to me, I don't know, my brain goes to the next room. So I need to watch the game being played or like play it myself, and that's how I learn best. So if I imagine that I'm teaching a room full of learners how to play a game and I'm only explaining it out loud, some of them will do fine and others will struggle just as much as I do. So we want to provide multiple modes of representation. That might mean providing a sound file along with text. It might also look like letting our learners customize the way that they take in the information. So if we have a video, allowing them to control the speed and volume. And when I think about this topic, I have a really fond memory of an online class that I took a couple years ago that really leveraged this principle. So it was a fully online interactive textbook that was the main instructional tool. And it was really dense content. It was a computer programming class. And so each chapter was pretty long, but it was broken into really small chunks. And each chunk came with an alternate representation, usually right next to the paragraph or right below it. So often it was like an animation that I could click through and rewatch at my own pace to get a visual representation, or sometimes practice like a matching or sorting activity. Absolutely, it was a great example of scaffolding.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks in the audience today can resonate with that experience, Melissa. And research on providing multimodal learning helps add some more meaning and strategy to your example. First, research has shown that universal design principles actually improve outcomes across diverse learners in a variety of ways, but especially in the ability to engage with content in various modalities. So we opened today's session with that question, and you all were sharing all these different modalities in which you're learning. So we know that this, of course, is universal design because it's benefiting all of us to interact with various modalities. Now, what I want to say is this research is not saying that learners who like images should be allowed to only consume the course content through images. Instead, actually, universal design intersects with multimedia learning research, which has shown that learners benefit from multiple representations. Even if there's one that maybe is kind of like a primary representation, an additional one helps just add and layer meaning. Now, when we're thinking specifically about creating learning experiences in an LMS like Canvas, research also reminds us that Canvas actually serves as this really solid foundation for this, both for accessible WCAG aligned content presentation and universal design opportunities. And when you pause for a second, this makes a lot of sense. The Canvas Rich Content Editor has formatting options that support all learners, including those using assistive technologies, and it allows for text, images, videos, and more to be presented together on pages for learners, just like Melissa was talking about, right? Now, the caveat there is these benefits exist when the learning management system is used thoughtfully. And so we hope that today's strategies are going to give you some ways to really leverage that foundation. Now, continuing on with the research, if you've followed along for any of our Design Matters blog and content and webinars, you've probably seen us cite Mayer's multimedia learning principles quite often. I already made a reference to them earlier when someone talked about redundancy because I can't help myself. But these multimedia principles really help us dive a bit deeper into how people take in multiple representations and some of those best practices for creating multimedia learning experiences without those trade-offs, right? Like the overwhelm or the redundancy. One specific principle is called the spatial contiguity principle, which is just a fancy phrase for the idea that learning is easier when words and corresponding visuals are near one another than when they're further apart. So Melissa's example was a perfect example of that. There was some, textbook actual text, and then there was some kind of visual or interaction that was paired with that. And just to share another personal story, my husband has been playing like a chess app. He's trying to learn chess right now. And he told me recently that it's gotten so much better, his experience, because it used to be that they would show at the end some feedback, the chessboard, and then feedback about, what happened in the chess game and how he might improve. But it was below it. And on his phone, he was having to scroll all the way down to read that and scroll all the way back up to the chessboard and back down and back up. And there was sort of this separation that occurred. And he told me that they recently changed the user experience where you can have the feedback read out loud to you, right? So it's like verbally being delivered while looking at the chessboard. And he said, oh my gosh, suddenly it was like so much easier. And I was like, that's the spatial contiguity principle. And thankfully, he is as nerdy as I am and didn't think that that was totally weird for me to say. But all of that taken into account here, it highlights another key idea from multimedia learning research. Non-essential or redundant content may direct cognitive capacity away from digesting the most critical information. So it is best to consider which representations are essential at any given moment, which may be additional help, and it's best to avoid just piling dozens of representations onto a page, since that would certainly lead to cognitive overload. So one key idea we want to take away about providing flexible multimodal content for your learners is to create or host those experiences in Canvas where possible, compared to, say, maybe hosting that content in a linked PDF, which may not be accessible for all learners and doesn't offer the same capacity for videos or interactive experiences and more. But you likely registered for this webinar because you want to know specific, practical ways to design flexible multimodal learning opportunities in Canvas. So saying like, put it in Canvas is probably preaching to the choir. So let's talk strategies. First, you may already know that chunking content is a great design strategy. So dust that concept off and think about pairing multiple representations into unified content segments, just like Melissa's example about that Python course. If you've got a page with a lot of text and image content, consider breaking that up with labeled headings that show which text and images share a topic, emphasizing that relationship then. And if you're trying to ace the spatial contiguity principle, you can float images and videos next to text or use column structures to keep those related representations close together. And remember, multiple means of representation doesn't mean all means of representation presented together. Be sure to separate and label so it's clear supplemental representations. To do so, you could use headings, or if you really want to save visual real estate and cognitive capacity, you could employ accordions, tabs, or even buttons that open resources when an individual needs to engage with them. So now we like to provide practical research-based strategies that anyone technically can accomplish in Canvas. However, sometimes those strategies can be tricky to implement without time or technical skills. And while I stand by my recommendation to host learning content in Canvas, some educators may have a course full of documents like PDFs. And I understand moving that into Canvas may seem pretty time-consuming. So Melissa, I know you do at Advantage. The course accessibility assistant from Cidi Labs can help. Can you show everyone how?
Yes, I would love to. This is one of my favorite things to do in You Do It. So let's start with this PDF that I have in my sandbox course. So it's from a high school physics course, and it could be worse. This one looks like it started life as a digital document. It's not a flatbed scan. So maybe screen readers can still do something with it, but PDFs are pretty notorious for having some kind of accessibility issues. So let's see what we can do to deal with this PDF. I'll switch over to You Do It in this same course. And I'm going to come to this review course files area. And in this area, You Do It's going to look at all of my course files and just let me know about any issues that it found with them. So here's that reading page, and sure enough, it's got at least one issue going on with the PDF. We could go remediate the PDF in whatever software we have and bring it back into the course. But why would we do that when we have a much better option, which is to generate a couple different alternate formats? And as we know, that making something in the LMS is going to be a much better baseline for accessibility as well as universal design principles. So I'm going to turn this PDF into a Canvas page, which is just, I think is still magic. And to save us a little time, I actually did this already. So I have the converted page here in my course, and this is what it looks like. You can see it's, of course, it's kind of a basic content page. It's a lot of text, but it does have all of these correct heading levels. And of course, because it's a Canvas page now, it can be scanned by accessibility checkers. But also as an added bonus, now that it's a Canvas page, I could go in and edit it and style it, maybe even with DesignPLUS. So let's take a look at another version. I promise that this version only took me about 1 minute to build. All I did was I took the version we just looked at, I added a theme which styled all of these headings for me. And then I also put this image with caption into a column, like Stephanie was mentioning earlier, to make sure that it was next to the content without like running over it, which was kind of happening on the previous page.
Oh my gosh. There's so many people nerding out in the chat, and I totally get it. And you know what's crazy is we didn't even showcase how in You Do It, both instructors and learners can generate alternate formats. So like a learner who maybe needs an MP3 version of a particular document at a point because they're going to take it in on their commute or something like that, they can generate those alternate formats. We didn't even talk about that, but just know it's there, people. And I also love that sneak peek on how Design Plus takes flexible multimodal Canvas content to the next level. I so casually told everyone they could float images and videos, and you were like, and I put this in a column, right, on that last example. But doing so in Canvas without Design Plus means flipping into that daunting HTML view. Melissa, can you show everyone some of what's possible with Design Plus without needing to know how to code?
Yes, I would love to. So there are a lot of ways that Design Plus can support universal design without that coding knowledge. So let's start by talking about slideshows. This is a really familiar format for a lot of educators. When I was teaching with Canvas, I thought I was pretty fancy for figuring out how to embed my Google Slide agenda onto my Canvas homepage, which, sure, the intention was there. I'm sure it was helpful for students. But at the same time, again, whenever we're bringing in an external format, we bring in the risk of more accessibility issues or barriers for students. So the good news with Design Plus is we don't have to give up this format. We can build a slideshow in Design Plus. So this one is built using our tabs tool. And you can see that these slides look like what you'd see in Google Slides or PowerPoint. We have all of these beautiful formats. By the way, this was built by our amazing Jess Kalo. And if it's not already in the library, I think it's on its way there. But as an added benefit, there are things we can do in a Design Plus slideshow that we can't do as easily in Google Slides or PowerPoint, like build in an interaction. So I could have my learners work their way through and then answer a question right here. And that could be how I could finish up my slideshow.
And just to clarify for everyone, this is Canvas. Like this isn't a presentation embedded from somewhere else. Like this is built right inside Canvas. So cool, Melissa.
Absolutely. Okay, and then the next thing I want to talk about is that fancy principle of spatial contiguity. So just making sure that we're providing a representation right with the main content that we want to teach. So I have this page. It's a topic near and dear to my heart as a former English teacher. It's about citing sources. And I tried to follow that principle because it's a kind of a heavy topic. So I used headings like we talked about earlier. I even chose a heading style that has this line across. So it kind of shows you that the text and this example are related to each other. And then you can see that I used columns to put an example next to each little point. Instead of making my learners scroll to the very bottom for a review or visit some other part of the course, I'm trying to provide these examples as we go. And then I also down here, we talked a little bit about arranging choices horizontally. This is actually something that came up in the first webinar in this series as well. So here, if I'm giving my students a couple different citation tools to work with, instead of listing them vertically, which is going to contribute to that endless scroll and make things harder to see, I'm going to arrange them horizontally. We have a much wider field of view than it is tall, so this is easier for my learners to take in, and it communicates visually that all of these options are okay. We don't have to rank them in any kind of order.
Yeah, and I'm going to interrupt you for just a second, Melissa, because up above where you just were on both of these elements, we've been talking about multiple means of representation. And while this is a text-heavy topic by nature, like it really just needs to be text to show how that citation works, the way that you formatted it with that border around it or the color coding down below works to support that visual element, even when it is still text-based. So just nerding out about that. Love that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and then I want to show two examples of how DesignPLUS can help you avoid some common issues, design issues that might be getting in the way of a smooth learning experience for everybody. So speaking of arranging horizontally, this next page, it's showing off a move that I used to make all the time as an educator in Canvas, which was placing content into a table in order to lay it out horizontally. So we have these three different topics and they're laid out in a table. And that looks okay when the screen is this nice 16 by 9, right? But let's imagine I have a learner, I'm going to resize, just a warning. Let's imagine I have a learner who's working on a mobile device, so it looks more like this. My table columns just get really skinny and kind of like Stephanie's husband with the chess app, I'd have to scroll down to finish a column and then back up, and it's just pretty messy. So I'm going to go in and edit this page and make it better using our table to columns feature, which is another DesignPLUS thing that I think is just kind of magic. So I have my accessibility and usability tab, and I can see a flag. Sure enough, the table checker is flagging my table. And so when I go in here, because this table really shouldn't have been a table, it's not representing tabular data, I'm going to use this table to columns button. And it just preserves all of the layout. Nothing looks very different in the editor, but it's going to make a world of difference for my learners. And we'll see that when I resize the saved page. So now, once it gets small enough, the columns will stack. They'll resize responsively based on the screen size, so my learners don't have to deal with those super skinny columns. And then one more thing that I want to show, this is a DesignPLUS feature that's really helpful when we're providing multimedia options, which I feel like is a topic that's come up a lot today. Let's imagine that you have a page with a couple different embedded things in it, like videos, or down here we have a game, which is taking its sweet time to load. We'll see if it comes in when I go into edit.
Sometimes I have to refresh for that game
Yeah.
to load. Yeah.
Let's see, because I definitely want us to see this. Okay, perfect. All right, so once again, looks okay on this large screen, but if I move down to a smaller screen, then the game is really not only really skinny, but it's added all this extra space underneath, which is not very nice, just wasted space on my screen. So let's go into edit. And we're going to use the Style iframes tool, which is a really nice way to deal with multiple embedded items at once. So that lives in our accessibility and usability area, just like the table checker. I'm going to open up Style iframes. And here I have a list of all of the embedded content. I could use this little show to jump to each piece in the editor. So when I jump down to my game, which again is being grumpy, I'm going to scale it proportionally and have it fill the width of the screen, whatever screen it's displaying on. And while I'm at it, because I can deal with multiple embedded items at once, I'm going to float my videos. Let's scroll up so we can see those. So we'll float this one left and we'll float this one right for a little variety. So now the videos, again, we have that spatial contiguity. They are right next to the text rather than having some wasted space. So let's see what that does to our saved page. All right, so we've already saved a bit of space and created this connection with the videos and the content. And then with this game, when I go onto a smaller screen, now it seems to be displaying a bit bigger. And most importantly, we don't have that strange wasted space at the bottom. All right, so Stephanie, can you move us forward?
Yes, I am going to grab that share back from you. And I will try to talk a little slower. I get so excited. Thank you for the feedback. Um, Gosh, that was a Design Plus demo jam-packed with amazing ideas. And if you didn't see what I said in the chat, everyone, yes, we will send out the recording. Yes, we will have links to some of these resources because I know we are moving quickly. Again, our hope is to highlight, showcase, inspire here today. Now, we are shifting gears to our next topic, layered meaning. The UDL framework's second guideline when designing multiple means of representation is to design options for language and symbols. Why? For one, we know words and symbols don't carry a single meaning. What may seem intuitive to the person creating the content may not make the same point to another person. And what's more is that language and symbols may act as a barrier for many learners. Certain vocabulary may be challenging for learners less familiar with the language or the domain-specific terms, while symbols that are pictures alone may not be accessible for learners using a screen reader, for example. And given this, it's important then to layer meaning for your learners through multiple representations. Now, a quick story for you all of why this is important. We have a platform we use to send out our emails. And as a side note, quick thank you to those of you who read the emails and register for webinars like this. We love it. But last week I was trying to replace an image on a template email and I could not find the replace button. It had always been in the same spot and I just couldn't find it. I'm looking around, and suddenly I spot like a tiny, tiny icon that has like some arrows and squares. And I think, is that supposed to be the replace button? It wasn't inherently intuitive to me. Yes, it turned out to be the replace button, but the point here is that using a symbol alone may seem like a visually elegant solution, but it's one of those design decisions that research has shown over and over reduces usability compared to an icon with a word. And so we love to layer that meaning. Now, what does the research say for this topic? Really, the idea, and someone actually mentioned this in the chat, is that the most effective learning environments are those that combine verbal and nonverbal representations of knowledge. And so it's not actually that, someone should always take in information in one modality. It's that this benefits everyone. And if your immediate question is, does every single word need a picture? No, certainly not, right? In fact, research on working memory and cognitive capacity actually caution against that, right? Having a ton of representations to attend to is quite distracting and easily leads to cognitive overload for your learners. So instead, what we would want to do is think about where and how to layer meaning strategically to support learner understanding without overwhelming them.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephanie. Something that stands out to me in that research is this idea of balance, which I feel like we're always looking for in education. We don't want too much or too little support. So our key idea here is that representations love a friend. Imagine if we were hanging a piece of art. It's not going to be very stable if we hang that wire over a single nail. But as soon as we add a second nail a little bit away from it, then it's just much more secure. So in the same way, different modes of representation can complement each other to make learning easier for everyone. And going back to that idea of combining verbal and nonverbal modes, I bet that if my friend who was explaining the game also walked through it on the board while she was explaining it, I'd have a great time building my understanding. So here are a few design principles to help us put this idea into practice. First, we want to put words and pictures together rather than relying on just one or the other. That way we can avoid the confusion that Stephanie had with this mystery button. Second, we can reduce cognitive load by placing supplemental information inside pop-ups or other design elements that save space and help learners stay focused on what's most important. And then we also want to be thoughtful in the way that we use variety. So navigational imagery, things like how to move through the course or an important reminder, how to hide or show something. These should always be consistent so that learners can perform those tasks without any friction. But then when it comes to representing specific ideas in the content area, variety can help learners distinguish between related ideas.
Absolutely. And those are helpful strategies to break down that research, Melissa. Thank you. What I want to showcase now, though, is how easy it is to design for layered meaning and reduce cognitive overload using DesignPLUS. So I'm going to hop over to a blank page in Canvas. And a reminder that DesignPLUS works on pages, assignments, discussions, announcements, classic quizzes. Like, there's a lot of places that you can use the magic of DesignPLUS as long as that rich content editor is there. And when I'm here editing, I'm going to go full screen just for, actually, I won't, because I'm going to talk about the Quick Start Wizard. One way that you can build quickly and easily with DesignPLUS is using the Quick Start Wizard, because we have a variety of templates that we preload for you, or perhaps that your institution builds out and provides to you to make this whole process easier, that do exactly what we're talking about. Layer meaning. Here you can see the heading says compare and contrast, and there's an icon associated with it. So we've got icon and text communicating the meaning. So we have that layered element here. But what I also want to show you is sort of the way in which DesignPLUS is built to support this exact kind of thing. And so now I am going to go full screen. And what I'm going to go ahead and do right away is just add a theme. So when I add a theme, I'm automatically getting some beautiful styling going on here. I can edit all of this and customize all of this. For the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and show you how you can continue building using content blocks. That's going to chunk up your text and allow you to continue layering meaning. So I'm going to go ahead and add a content block. And when I do, I'm just given kind of a generic content block structure. And right here, I can edit and say, okay, maybe this content block is called introduction. And I'm given an icon picker available right here for me with over 2,500 icons that I can choose from to make this have layered meaning on this heading, right? This is a good space to go ahead and layer that meaning. Remember, every single word doesn't need a picture to go with it, but these key concepts like a heading that's directing my attention is a really fabulous place to layer that meaning. And so just like that, I can customize and build out beautiful, but also super supportive representations with that layered meaning. But that's not it all, right? Like, I can build all these on my own, and that didn't take very long, but I can also scroll down here to content blocks that are already pre-built for me, whether that be, again, provided by Cidi Labs or that your institution has built out to serve your needs. And there's categories here to keep everything nice and organized. If I just open up maybe this general panel here, I can see that I can very quickly add several content blocks. Oops, didn't want to add that one, but that's okay. Grading. So these are coming in automatically with the heading and a styled icon that goes with it. We can also add some fancy content blocks, right? Ones like these columns with icons or these hanging icons that also come with styled buttons that are easy to update. So if I add that, we can see that there. A whole set of amazing content blocks, even really beautiful ones like these cards that help with that issue where everyone wants to lay out content using tables, but that's not a very accessible practice. Instead, you can use cards and columns, again, that are pre-built. And notice all of the ways that layered meaning is working here. We've got this image with this topic. We've got links to various elements inside Canvas with their associated Canvas icons. So I hope you can see that it's easy to layer meaning using DesignPLUS if you're just building from scratch, or if you're leveraging all of those pre-built elements. Now for some more showcase, other ways to layer meaning, you can see, of course, this page is also incorporating those styled headings. But I want to draw your attention up here. If you're like me and, off the top of your head, even if you just learned about it, you might not be able to say the difference between a polygon, a polyhedra. You can add tooltips in DesignPLUS that have that additional definition, but notice it's not taking up any visual real estate, right? So it's reducing that cognitive load, but it's still allowing for layered meaning and access for anybody who needs it. If maybe you have more content that you want to provide and you don't want to send students out somewhere else or to another page, you can also use our dialog boxes, which operate kind of like a pop-up inside DesignPLUS. And so I can add additional layered meaning here. If someone wasn't familiar with origami, they could access that information. You can see some more examples of the spatial contiguity principle here, and also kind of working against that forever scroll that might happen when you're trying to add a lot of information with images. Here we have these tabs set up next to this image, which is really helpful. And then when I come down here, we also have this progress indicator that helps my learners navigate through the course. Now you're like, Stephanie, those are icons alone. That's exactly what you were just talking about. Don't worry, when I hover over those, I'm given the information I need to make sure that it's not just a confusing icon that has a page and no additional information. And to Melissa's point, do note that the elements like the headings, right, are places where you don't necessarily want to have a ton of variability with how you're layering meaning, because these help learners get used to the mental model, navigate a little better, as well as you'll notice these progress indicators are using the canvas icons, because we hope that those are familiar and that reduces the cognitive burden of processing these elements. All right, now I am going to jump back to our slides.
Oh, I love to see it. Especially those progress indicators. I'm actually taking a course right now and the provider uses DesignPLUS and they include progress indicators and I use them all the time. Like if I just need to jump somewhere else in the module to help me with something, they're really helpful. So without further ado, we'll move on to our last topic, which is knowledge building. So the way I think about this is when we're learning something new, it is not just like pouring facts into our head, like sugar into a bowl. We're building a structure, a mental structure as we learn a concept to help us understand and make sense of the relationships within that concept. And so if we're going to go with a construction metaphor, we can lay the foundation for learners by providing models that they can then build on. For example, if I look at a Venn diagram, that already kind of jumpstarts my brain to start building that compare and contrast understanding of whatever the topic is. And Stephanie, when we were talking about this earlier, we had kind of a similar example, huh?
Yeah, so we were talking about grocery store lists and the way that we build those and how those help like with our mental models and allow us to move through. My husband develops a grocery list by taking a blank piece of paper and essentially drawing the map of the grocery store and labeling the elements he needs to purchase for where they go. He is a deeply visual and kind of spatially aware person. That does not work for me. I cannot look at, I'm going to get lost looking at that map. My brain just goes like cross-eyed. I don't know which way is north. And so I'm more of like a category person, like words and categories.
Absolutely, yeah. And my husband is the one that does the shopping, and he's kind of a blend of both of you and your husband because he also goes based on the layout of the store, but he uses a smart sheet with all kinds of fancy filters and sorting capabilities to just, that's what streamlines his process.
Totally. And the point here, right, is that we all use mental models, but we can also support one another's mental models in the learning process by using these kinds of structures that can then transfer for others. And so we've all probably used assorted graphic organizers, for example, to like communicate information or to even structure information for our own learning. So let's dig into the research a bit. The first quote on the slide explains that for meaningful learning to occur, meaningful, this is the kind of learning we're after, right? Not just that they learned, check. Students need to organize multiple representations of information into a coherent mental model and then integrate it with their prior knowledge. Shout out to that KWL, right? Helping us with that. This means students are taking all those representations given to them, but there's still work to be done in organizing them and connecting all those dots in order to effectively store, retain, retrieve, and reuse the learning. So how can you support that cognitive process? Well, one way is that you can see those next two bullet points explain that visual structures support concept retention, because you're essentially like preloading some of that organization work for your learners' minds. And scaffolded course design can improve learners' cognitive awareness because it emphasizes a logical flow of ideas, right? So educators, I know that you work hard to ensure your lessons provide information in a really logical way. The research reminds us that we can make that flow explicit to our learners through visual design or through labeled structure. Now, I love some nuance, so I'll highlight one more piece here. Research on instructional support is clear that scaffolds, such as the visual structures that make relationships explicit, we're mentioning here, that helps learners better construct knowledge. But there's a key word in this quote, which is appropriate scaffolding. So don't take our suggestions today to mean that if every one of your lessons doesn't contain visual structure to mirror the cognitive task, you're not supporting your learners. No, think of scaffolding exactly as what the word implies, right? It's not permanent and nor is it always required. And in fact, a lot of research on learning says that if you over scaffold and provide scaffolds when they're no longer necessary, you're reducing the learner's ability to do that like really helpful struggle that actually then further encodes that information into their mind. So they got to use those structures on their own. We want them to spontaneously use those structures later.
Absolutely. And so if we had to boil all of that research down into a key idea, it would be that structure supports building. So we want to preload the structure to support our students in the work of building those mental models that help them retain information. And basically, we can reduce the lift for learners to understand something complex if we've already signaled that complex idea through design. So here are some of the ways that we can lay that foundation. First, we can use techniques like consistent naming conventions on modules to make the learning journey explicit. So maybe you would always use the word practice on a practice to signal to learners that they're moving from exploring the idea to applying it. Next, we want to use a combination of icons, text, and structure to give our learners clear cues that help them understand the relationships between ideas. And then the research showed us the power of visual structure, so we can leverage that by choosing layouts that reflect the mental models we want students to build. And finally, just like we said earlier, representations love a friend. So we want to go beyond just color coding, which can be an accessibility issue, and instead cover all of our bases by coding with a combination of color, text, and icons. That is a great way to signal important relationships or waypoints on the learning journey.
Absolutely, Melissa. And by now, you all probably know the drill. Design Plus makes it easy to design knowledge building structures into Canvas. That KWL chart that we kicked off the webinar with is actually just one example. So let's explore some others. I'm going to, not on this page, over here, move to some next examples that include some pre-built learning structures. And here's what I want to say right off the bat. These are the pre-built learning structures that come already loaded into the sidebar for you. So this is not a design task for you. This is a open Design Plus and use task for you if you want to incorporate these elements. So we've got step-by-step instructions that have some visual element to them, but they also have that layered meaning added in. And here we're helping our learners recognize that there's a step one, move to step two, move to step three with these arrows and with the color coding and all of that. There's a cause and effect block that you can utilize already pre-built for you. There's a key benefits block, right? Again, we see all this layered meaning here, but we've got the structure that's helping learners understand, okay, there are 6 key benefits, and they can actually oftentimes pull this visual back up in their minds if they were taking this content in visually during maybe a moment where they need to apply the learning. There's this lovely lecture hook that creates this really obvious kind of big idea element that allows the key idea to stand out visually on a page, reminding your learners to make a connection. So this is an opportunity, very universal design, not only to make it explicit what you're asking them to do, which is take their learning and connect it to their real world, but this is also a key tenet of universal design, making the learning applicable, because that helps address learner variability. The learners are making their own connections to their own world and not just you making a connection for them and assuming that might make a lot of sense. Some of you might not have loved our grocery store analogy, right? And so this idea of making your own connection is really key. We also have a what would you do blog. I love this one for a really nerdy design decision that rather than using expanders where all the choices open, it really gets at the idea of like a forced choice. Like if you open one, and then you check out choice 2, the other one closes. And that's so silly, but these accordions facilitate that idea of having to select an option. I also want to say inside the library, there are even more of these pre-built structures that support your learner's understanding of the content. There are timelines, multiple timeline examples inside the library. And then I'm going to scroll down to one last one. This is our last moment here in demo with you all today. This T-chart block with interactive is available inside the DesignPLUS library. Again, it's got a structure here, a T-chart, which helps for comparison. It's nicely labeled, but it also comes with an opportunity for your learners to engage, to actively do the sorting that then supports that mental model in their own mind. Love this so much. This is utilizing some of our interactive exercises that we have in DesignPLUS. We have more than just the sorting activity. We have matching, we have fill in the blank, we have all kinds of interactive exercises. But this one allows the learner to move the options, whether that be through drag and drop or through keyboard action. They can move these elements into categories and they can check their understanding. And the educator has the ability to adjust these settings for how they want to provide feedback and at what points, but they can just do this without it being connected to the gradebook. They're not receiving points for this, and this is an opportunity for them to support their mental models and to actually encode that information into kind of long-term memory, which we just love. So this is also available in the library, and yes, we will send out links to all of that in the follow-up email. So let's bop back for just a second to say we've reached the end of our content today. And now let's take a minute to do the L for our KWL. And this is important for you as well. And if you don't love to type in the chat, you don't have to, but take a second and reflect. What is your learning or a takeaway or something you're excited to explore more from this KWL? A reminder again that you can access this in the DesignPLUS library. We will send out the link. Feel free to type in the chat for your learning. And we will kind of just jump into our summary as you're thinking. Some fun stuff in the chat. Well, thank you for thinking about, for sharing your learning in the chat as we go. We hope you've learned some practical ways to design for flexible, multimodal content, for layered meaning and knowledge building right inside Canvas. And well, we hope if you do not currently use UDoIT or DesignPLUS and you want, like the W and the KWL, to learn more, you can.
We'll turn it over to questions in just a moment. We do have like 5 minutes. But if you're looking to learn more about DesignPLUS and UDoIT, be sure to reach out at cidilabs.com. And you can also scan the QR code on the screen as well to sign up for a demo. Claire, anything in chat that you think would be nice to answer live?
We have a lot of questions about compliance and accessibility. So do we have any answers that we'd like to put towards that?
Yeah, sure. Briefly, I can just say that DesignPLUS is built with accessibility at its core. I think Kenneth was actually on the call, our co-founder and the original creator of this tool, but accessibility really matters to him as well. In fact, we had an entire series called Accessibility Matters. But when you are utilizing DesignPLUS, we showed you kind of in the way that it's building out, there were structured headings being created. So our banner titles come in at a heading 2 automatically, and the content blocks come in with heading 3s. And so structured headings are coming in for you. The way that elements are being generated inside those content blocks, for example, like when you're using columns, that's more accessible than using a table if it's not for tabular data, right? We also have accessibility checkers. Melissa showed off some of the usability elements of our accessibility checkers, but if I were to, say edit this page, and you can get a real look under the hood here, for how these elements are being built. We have as well accessibility and usability checkers, because just because something starts off as accessible doesn't mean as we're adding content, especially as we add representations like images, then maybe we forgot to add in that alt text or something like that. So we definitely have an alt text checker, heading checker, contrast checker. I saw someone mention something about like certain limitations for STEM. We do have this really cool math checker as well that I've been told works really well for translating the alt text that's provided by default by LaTeX into something that's just more understandable for a human. So we love the math checker. Table checker also facilitates a lot of learning in STEM because it reminds you that your tables are going to need the proper headers, and you can add captions for your tables really easily as well. The tool itself is also built accessibly, so you can navigate it using a variety of means and methods. And those interactives that I showed you, the interactive exercises were a labor of love and certainly a labor to ensure that they were built accessibly, and we're constantly updating to make them accessible. I went on and on about that, but can you tell that I care? So if you ever run into an accessibility issue in any of our tools, we sincerely hope that you let us know because we would like to fix it right away.
Mhm.
Any other questions that we had that came up quite a bit or anything kind of left hanging? We've got 2 minutes. It's exciting.
There's a chat comment. We love that you care, Stephanie. Katie says that they're looking at incorporating more interactivity. We have so many new interactive exercises, so be sure to keep up with our release notes. I've been sending the form to contact your customer success manager. So if you want a brainstorming session, if you want to learn about new features in the tools, submit that form and we'll be in touch. I'll send it one last time just for funsies.
And not that I want to overwhelm anyone on this team, but Cidi Labs is wildly responsive. So if you do have a question, reach out, cidilabs.com/support, ask questions. We'll try to route that to the right people and ensure we can get your question answered. Thank you all for being here for this series so far. We have the last of the 3 webinars in this mini series coming next month. So please do check out our webinar page, cidilabs.com/webinars, and you can register for the webinar next month.